I was a basketball player. Like I was like, that's the only population I want to work with. The only one. Like I want to work strictly with basketball. And my mentor said, find something else. The first team you work with, find a different team, find a different sport, something outside of your comfort zone to really help you test your skills as a mental performance consultant, as a clinician, and really have to think, right? Like you have to learn something totally different, something totally new, and figure out how can I apply mental skills to these athletes? How can I help these athletes? If they are down in a game and they really, they need the skills or the coping strategies to help them push through that. So I would say yes, went in right away, basketball, 100%. And then I started working with baseball players. I worked with a collegiate bowler. I started working with soccer teams and football. Like I just really started to get outside of my comfort zone.
What is up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpon. This is Phil's Guide to Ed.D. This channel is dedicated to all things psychology, wellness, and graduate school. Today we have a very special guest with us. His name is Dr. Quincy Davis. He will be talking about all of the different ways to become a sports psychologist. Now, before we jump into that interview, I do want to share a plug. You guys can follow me on Instagram at Phil's Guide to Ed.D. If you guys are looking for ways to support the channel, one of the best ways to support the channel is by becoming a member through YouTube. That way you can get some early access to different videos that we haven't released yet. You also get a little bit more one-on-one attention with me in terms of any questions that you guys may have about graduate school that you want me to answer directly to you. That is a great way to becoming a member and actually getting some more access to me in terms of some of the things that might actually help you for graduate school. Now, before we also jump into the interview, I do want to also share that this video is sponsored by an app called 8 Inside 8D Relaxation and Sleep. Now, I have been using this app for several weeks, and I have to say that it is an incredible app. This app provides a combination of relaxing music, ASMR, some meditation vibe sounds, and something called 8D sound, which is when you put your headphones on and you know that feeling that you get where you feel like the sound is surrounding you. That is what 8D sound is, and that is what this app provides. It is helpful for calming nerves. It's actually helped me a lot, as I mentioned, for falling asleep a lot faster, and it helps me get into a quicker meditative state a lot faster as well. I will put down a link below and you guys can actually check out that app. If you put in Phil's Guide as the promo code, you get 20% off. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys might say about this app. Now, without further ado, we will go ahead and jump right into the interview. All right, Dr. Davis, I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate you sharing this space with me, man. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I would love to start out. Maybe you can just tell the audience a little bit about, what actually got you into sports psychology. Like, what was the moment for you that you realized, like, okay, this is actually what I want to do for a profession?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back for me. I was a collegiate athlete. I played basketball in college. And so my senior year, I really struggled a lot, just from the mental aspect of the game. And it was really in-game performances for me. Like practice, I was fine. Like I felt confident. Everything was free flowing for me. I get into the game and I make a mistake or I take a bad shot, and it was just like downhill from there. And so at the time, I didn't really know much about sports psychology. And then it just so happened to be that next semester, I took a class in sports psychology. And I was like, oh my gosh, if we had a sports psychologist or any type of mental performance consultant on campus, that'll make a world's difference for me. And so I started looking into it a little bit further. Actually, didn't end up going into sports psychology right away. I just went and got a degree in counseling, an emphasis in school counseling, actually. And then waited a couple years. I've been working in a high school, and then went on to get my degree in sports psychology after I called around a lot, talked to a lot of professionals in the field just to kind of see what it was like, and something I would be really passionate about for sure. But just being able to be committed to the field and provide a service that I feel is a high need for athletes. And so that is, I have been, as soon as I learned more about it, I was all in. Like you couldn't tell me any different at the time. because it was just like, man, like I want to be able, yes, I'm passionate about counseling, I'm passionate about mental health, but being able to provide these services to the athletic population is huge and can make a world's difference, like I said. So that's kind of what got my journey and piqued my interest in going into this field.
That's incredible. I love that. And I think it's cool that you yourself were an athlete. And so you saw that need for athletes and you wanted to kind of fill that need for yourself in that profession. I guess currently for you right now, like what does your day to day look like?
Yeah, so it's a little different because that's yes, I have a background in a degree in sports psychology, right? I currently work as a counselor still, so I'm still in the high school. And actually, when I was doing like my internships and stuff like that, that was when I was really like involved in my work with athletes. And so I had just recently graduated with my doctorate in the last fall, September of 2022. And then knew I wanted to get into the sports psych field, like was trying to really figure out my way and what I wanted to do. And so I'm not technically working as a sports psych right now or a mental performance consultant at all. We can kind of go a little bit deeper into what the difference is between the two of those, because that term is just what a sports psych is, just basically based off what everybody else is talking about. But there's just so many different ways in which we should use that term. And so I don't currently work as a mental performance consultant right now. Still working as a high school counselor and actually starting to generate my practice. I'm starting to get that going, trying to get that off the ground right now. And so and working with athletes here and there, it's nothing that's too deep, but I can tell you a lot about when I was working with teams and kind of what that looked like. I've worked with collegiate basketball teams, collegiate football teams, a lot of individual athletes, and it can get very busy. I'll tell you particular about the football team I was working with. I did their spring camp last the year before, so not 2020, yeah, 2022 spring camp. And then did their when everybody came back on campus in the fall. And that was just hectic, man. Like they did intensive days, and I was out there with them. I mean, they started much earlier than I got out there, first of all. So they were up for breakfast at 6 a.m. I think they were, doing film study and playbook study at 7 a.m. and then on the field at 8 a.m. And I would be out there at 8 a.m. with them on the field. And they would go from about 8 to 11, go get lunch, and then right back at it again. Film session, team sessions, small group, large group, and then they would have something else in the evening, and they'd probably be done around 7 or 8 p.m. And so they're doing 12 8-hour days. And at the time, I'm really trying to see how can I, you know, insert myself into the team. Like I know they already have a lot going on. And so where can I apply my skills and be of service to the team? And so sometimes just hanging out at practice, being on the sidelines, having guys come up to me and say, yeah, I'm just really in a funk right now, or I'm feeling this way, or, just being able to have those sidebar conversations was huge. But then also being able to have those large team sessions after practice, the coach comes up to me, during practice and says, hey, we got to get our mind in the right place. I'm seeing this A, B, C, and D. Can you talk to our guys about that after practice today? Yep, let's have a quick conversation about it. He's like, we only got 10 minutes. I can do that in 10 minutes. And so a lot of the stuff is on the fly. A lot of the time, you have to really be able to be prepared to have something to speak with the athletes about. If the coach comes to you with the topic, and then really get creative with it as well, knowing that you're not going to have a lot of time and you have to, either break it down and kind of put it in simple terms or save it for a later time that you're meeting with a large group. And so the day to day varies, and I'm sure there's a lot of professionals who will kind of tell you the same thing: is that you're not going to have the same day every single day as a sports psychologist or as a mental performance consultant. It's going to be and it's going to be based off what the coach wants, what the players need, team overall need. And so, yeah, you kind of got to, just be able to be very flexible. I think is the huge piece of it, being flexible,
Yeah.
and understanding that day by day tasks are going to vary every single time.
That's so cool. I think that's probably one of the things that I've noticed about just kind of looking into the sports psychology realm is that like with individual, like with counseling, it's just, usually it's just individual therapy. There might be
Mhm.
some group therapy, support groups that you might be a part of, but the interesting thing about sports psychology is that you may not be working individually with just one-on-one, counseling. You're working in those team dynamics. You're working with the coaches, and so I feel like there's multiple different like pieces. Like there could be that one-on-one, but there's also you with the team, or it could be you with the coach, or you with multiple coaches. And so like any other like I guess major differences between counseling and sports psychology that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, you got to also think about it from a confidentiality perspective, right? And being able to play and balance multiple roles in multiple relationships. And so, if you are working within a team system and you have a coach who really is, really hands on, and he comes up to you and is like, hey, like what did you and so talk about today? You gotta walk on fine ice, like you kind of you can't you don't want to give too much information, but you want to give enough to in order to make sure that they're satisfied with the work that you're doing. You also don't want to break that trust with the rapport that you've already built with the athlete, because they're going to say, oh, if you're everything I tell you is going right back to coach, then why would I talk to you? And then within a team, you find that out really quick. All it takes is one guy to say, "Oh yeah, he's telling everything that we're saying to him. He's going to talk to the coach." It takes that one person to say that, and you've lost everybody. And you're doing a lot of work to rebuild that trust up. So, I would say the biggest thing, and of course you have to worry about confidentiality within, just counseling one on one individually, but there's so many different people involved within the team. And you got to think wider, right? You get into a large university setting or a professional team, and you're looking at not only like the owners of teams, but you're looking at athletic trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, physicians. There's so many different roles and relationships that you have within a team that you are trying to make sure that you do not breach confidentiality or and still trying to maintain those relationships where everybody respects you and your work, on a daily basis. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference that you see. And it just takes you really being in tune and having that awareness of, okay, where can I, how should I tread this water here? And, how much information can I provide? And it's really, it takes some practice and it takes a little bit of time, but eventually everybody, you figure it out.
That's incredible. I'm wondering too, like for you, I guess, like, 3, 5 years from now, like in your practice, I guess, where do you envision yourself in that, fitting it within that role? Are you wanting to like work or travel with a team? Are you wanting to work with like have your own private practice and have players come to you? Or like, how do you envision
Mhm.
that for yourself in the future?
Yeah, I mean, my ultimate goal is to work within a university setting. I want to work at a large university, or just I guess really any university, within their athletic department as a mental performance or athletics counselor, in that role. And at the same time, you can still have your own practice on the side, right? So you might just working with university athletes, but you may be working with other performers or youth athletes outside of that realm. So still want to maintain somewhat of a private practice, but also be immersed in that university setting.
Got you. And then, for you, like, I guess maybe we can go back to this too, but because we were kind of talking a little bit about how to, I guess, become a sports psychologist, and so
Mhm.
there are multiple different pathways. It seems like so for you, you got your bachelor's in psychology, and then you got your master's in education counseling. You mentioned,
Mhm.
and then you went ahead and got that doctorate in sports psychology. You also have a certification, right?
Yes.
It's the CMPC,
Yep. Mhm.
certified mental professional
Performance
coach,
con-
performance
performance
coach,
consultant. Performance
performance
consultant. Yep.
consulting. Okay,
Hmm.
got you.
Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering, like, okay, like what are the different pathways to become a sports psychologist? Like for you, would you encourage other students to kind of take your path, or have you noticed that there are other paths to kind of get to the same point?
Oh man, that's a great question. Because there's so many different paths to get to become a professional within this field. And I would say that I've somewhat taken the harder route just because I'm not clinically licensed yet, and so that's what I'm currently working on. Right, I have a counseling background, but it's specifically tailored towards school counseling. And so I'm still working on my LPCC within the state, but don't have that full licensure yet. Now, thinking back to my master's program, I had the opportunity to go into clinical mental health counseling. Had I done that, I would be fully licensed. The path would have been a little bit smoother towards the popular, just the jobs that I want to try to attain, and things like that. And so I feel like there's so many different pathways within this field to get to what you want to do, and it's an individualized type of basis, because there's people who solely want to work with athletes on their performance. If you want to work within like a university setting, or you want to work within a professional team setting, like you want to have some type of clinical mental health background. And so they're looking for individuals who are licensed as either clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists. They have LPCs, LPCCs. They're looking for those individuals who also receive some type of education in sports psychology, and have that certification as a mental performance consultant. And so that is like the plan A. Like if I knew exactly what I was going to do, that would be the easiest route. However, that's not always the case, because there's so many different programs out there. Like I said, there's somebody who might just want to work solely with individuals on performance related issues and nothing clinical. And so they might have a background in exercise science. There's a lot of kinesiology programs out there who have a sports psych focus, but nothing in the clinical realm. And so those individuals are going to be working with a population of athletes on just solely their mental skills, mental performance, everything like that. And so it's really, there's no direct path, and I wish I can give you just a straight answer as to what, and in the audience a straight answer, but you will see. And I encourage everybody who's watching or tuning into this, if you are interested in the field of sports psychology, I go to the national conference. It's the ASP conference, Association for Applied Sports Psychology. The national conference is amazing. I went for the first time this year. Just due to COVID, everything was virtual before this, but this was my first in-person conference. Outstanding. I mean, I can't. It's hard to put into words because it was just that great. So much information, so many connections made. Like the networking there is outstanding. If you can't go to one, then go to a regional conference, and they have many different regional conferences throughout the year. I would say you're probably going to get the most bang for your buck going to the national conference. But the regional conferences, they also do a really good job of putting those on. And then you'll see that there's people from many different backgrounds, like people who are strength and conditioning coaches who want to go back and get their CMPC, just so they can have that aspect, or try to tie the two of those disciplines together, or people who are, I don't know, just teachers, right? There's people who are just professors at universities who are CMPCs, so they're doing all of the supervision and all of the teaching in the field. And so it's really hard to put into like I said, just one pathway. Well, me, for myself, I knew I wanted to go into the mental health realm, wanted to, and then add that sports psychology piece to it. And so now I'm just working on licensure. And so if you, and many of those who are wanting to work within, like I said, a professional level or work at the collegiate level, having that mental health licensure is top tier. Like if you look at any job posting, that's what they're asking for. Are you licensed as an LPC, LPCC, PsyD, counseling, like anything within that mental health field. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. Hopefully that explains it enough. That's, like I said, it's a broad topic that you can kind of go down the rabbit hole on.
I love that, honestly, and thank you for sharing all of that. I think that's kind of a little bit of what I've seen too, is that like I've seen other people maybe go for the masters in some type of kinesiology, biology, physiology, and then get some type of certification like the CMPC and just work specifically with consulting, or the PhD, the PsyD, the counseling PhDs. So many different pathways. And so I guess it does really depend on the individual and what they prefer and what they're wanting to do. I'm curious for you, like for the CMPC, like what was that pathway like? And maybe also Why did you choose the CMPC, and how has it been getting that certification for you?
Yeah, so I guess I can just start with what the CMPC and how like what that looks like for people to try to obtain. So you definitely have to, there's a certain amount of hours you have to read. Just like with any, think back to like the just the counseling field or any type of licensure you're trying to obtain, you have to accrue a certain amount of hours. And so there's contact hours with athletes, performers, teams, direct, indirect. And then once you fulfilled all of those guidelines, and I can't even rattle them off right now because there's a lot, you have to take certain classes. You have to take a class in every one of their domains. And so several classes in some of them. And so once you have fulfilled all of those requirements, you can then test for the CMPC. I just recently took it 2 weeks ago and passed.
Let's
Thankfully,
go. That's
I
awesome.
passed. So yeah, I do have that certification now, CMPC, and it's a huge certification because not many people have it, right? And it just represents the highest designation within this field. A lot of people call themselves mental performance coaches and mental performance consultants, and that they may very well be. But if you are looking at jobs, like if they're looking for something that's preferred or something that they would, looking for in a candidate, CMPC is right there. And so the CMPC is very, I would say, if there's somebody who wants to go into this field, go for the CMPC. Find a mentor, find teams and athletes to work with, get those hours. Make sure you've taken classes that that you're meeting requirements in all the classes, so that you can then submit your application and be accepted to take the test. So yeah, the CMPC, it's an exam of 115 questions. You have 90 minutes to take it, and so you're kind of cruising along, within all those questions. And there's many study materials out there, so I can give a couple of resources, but I don't know them all. So but yeah, it's I would say if it's a designation that somebody has even been thinking about and they're going into this field, then you should go for it, 100%. And you will be glad that you have obtained this certification, because you'll see how many doors it can open for you just along your journey. And no matter what your end goal is, you'll be able to have this certification and say, well, there's not many people who have this, and especially with depending on the state that you live in, because there's some states who have, three or four, CNPCs, and some that have 20, but there might only be one in that area. So, yeah, you just never know.
I really appreciate that because I think I forget who I was talking to, but they were mentioning that with the CMPC, it also, just like you said, opens doors for students, but also people get a kind of a gateway into like the Olympic athlete,
Hmm.
working with Olympic athletes potentially. And
Hmm.
it's not just kind of like a, perhaps the collegiate or maybe even professional, but like even like the big like Olympic athlete category. So that's really cool to see. And I'm excited to see what that would look like for just more sports psychologists with that certification,
Hmm.
and some of the jobs that they're doing and some of the careers that they're working in. Do you think that, 5-10 years from now, because I feel like the last couple of years, I feel like people have been talking more about mental health. I feel like the stigma is kind of decreasing a lot, a lot less in terms of people just talking more about it on social media. There's a lot more athletes that are also talking about it. Where do you see the profession kind of going in the next 5-10 years in terms of, will there be just more sports psychologists, in other teams, collegiate teams, professional teams? How do you see it kind of like growing and evolving over time?
Yeah, ideally, it's everywhere, right? Ideally, it's something that every university, every school has, every sports program has. Like, there's so many athletes that we're never going to be able to have just as many sports psychs or mental performance consultants that can serve them. So ideally, you're seeing this grow. Like this field is still in its infancy, and it's been around for so long, right? And so now you're, like you said, you're starting to hear these athletes talk about the importance of mental health and the importance of sports psychologists and mental performance consultants and how they can be beneficial to your career, your athletic career. And so, you're thinking 10 to 15 years from now, like ideally, that's what you see on college campuses. And you don't just see one within the athletic department, but you see three to four within the athletic department, and they're being able to serve, multiple teams, and really spread awareness about mental health and mental skills and mental performance, so that athletes can, perform at a high level, right? And so I think that you will see a lot of growth within this field, especially within 10 to 15 years. There's no doubt about that.
That's awesome. What's a piece of advice that you would give students trying to get into this field, whether they're in college, whether they're in grad school? How can they kind of start to prepare themselves in terms of getting into this profession?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest thing is ask questions. Like, don't be afraid to reach out. I did a lot of reaching out when I was searching for my doctoral program, to people I had no clue who they were. And it's sometimes you'll just figure out that it's a small world, and you'll end up tied back to that person some way, somehow. And so just reach out, like ask questions. You never know. Like, and I knew that once I got to this phase in my career, that I wanted to be a person who just was able to be to have students reach out to me and answer questions and really be a resource. Because sometimes, I know you're sending emails to this many people. Say you send an email to 10 people and you might get two back, right? Or you might get one back, and it can feel deflating. But there people are very busy. One, and then two, like there's just many people who are probably reaching out doing the same thing, and that can really be a burnout type of thing to get into. So, I would say, yeah, just asking questions, man. It can go a long ways. And then also attending those conferences, like if you're a student in the field, or if you are wanting to be in this field, like attend that national conference. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. You're gonna see, and learn about so much, and you'll see that just within the field how helpful everybody and how willing people are to have a conversation with you. I had so many just impromptu conversations with other professionals while I was at this conference because I wanted to learn more. I had seen them on social media, so I walked up to them, introduced myself, and we just started having a great conversation, about our career paths and how to get from A to B and what they were currently working on. And so, yeah, just not being afraid to network, not being afraid to put yourself out there. And eventually it all comes around full circle. Like you should be able to reap some benefit from that. And so that would be my biggest advice that I would give to anyone.
It's so interesting also kind of looking at the demographics of just clinicians in general, like in terms of whether they're clinical psychologists, sports psychologists, mental health professionals. Because I think one thing that I've noticed is that the majority of these clinicians are in the white majority, and there's just not a lot of African American clinicians, whether on the master levels therapist side, whether on the counseling, or whether on the doctoral side. For you, like what does it look like for you to kind of start to kind of fill in the gaps of being a person of color, being able to help athletes who are also people of color, racial, ethnic minorities? How does that kind of paint the picture for you in terms of the field that you're working in?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there are many Black professionals within this field, no doubt about it. And there's many great ones who have done great work. But there's always going to be a need for more, right? We're still trying to eliminate that stigma. We're still trying to be a face and a resource for student athletes who look just like us. And so just think about that. Like if you're an athlete and you're struggling with something, like you want to go to somebody who not only looks like you, but if they have a shared experience, maybe they were a college athlete, it's going to be much easier to build that relationship and build that rapport with them, and have those conversations. Not to say that it's not easy to do it with somebody who is not a person of color, right? You can still do that. That resource is there for you, but there's just a feeling of like relaxation about it. Like there's just like they may not feel judged, or maybe they don't wait as long to do it because they feel comfortable, being in a space with another person of color. Like that, I feel like it's something that we need to continue to build upon within this field. And there's always going to be high need, and always going to be for sure jobs out there, for people who are of different ethnic groups or different backgrounds. Like they were talking about this at the national conference, but many MLB teams, baseball teams, are looking for Spanish speaking mental performance consultants. Look at the demographic within the MLB, right? And that's what you usually see. Like if you see a job for an MLB team, they're asking for somebody who is bilingual or Spanish speaking. And so, yeah, there's many advantages to those things, even if you're not. Like that's an advantage to have, right? To be bilingual and be able to just relate from a cultural standpoint to another individual. So, yeah, I definitely would like to see more. And if like at the national conference, they did hold like a black student like get together or just black professional get together, and I saw many there, but I get into this room and there's about 100 of us, and I was like, oh my god, like it was just the best space to be in. I'm telling you right now, Phil, it was amazing. Just because like you have like the OGs of the OGs who have been in this field forever. And now they're looking around and they were like, when we first did this get together, there was only two of us, and now there's 100 in this room. And so we're hoping to continue to build upon that within this field, and really inspire, people of color to get within this job, and get within this profession because it's needed. Just like in any mental health, right? Like the stigma is still there. The stigma is probably always going to be there until we can fully break it down. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, we definitely need more people of color, different ethnic groups, to be in this field.
That is so sweet. And it's so great to hear that there was that growth of people that you saw in that room where it's like, okay, that's the next generation of sports psychologists that are coming in that are also going to look more like the demographics that they serve. So I love hearing that. Is there a sport in particular that you're wanting to work with? Or are you kind of looking broadly in terms of your sports psychology realm?
Yeah, this is another piece of advice, big key, because everybody goes into sports like or mental performance thinking that they are going to work with the field that they competed in, right? They're a football player in high school, baseball player. I was a basketball player. Like I was like, that's the only population I want to work with, the only one. Like I want to work strictly with basketball. And my mentor said, find something else. The first team you work with, find a different team, find a different sport, something outside of your comfort zone to really help you test your skills as a mental performance consultant, as a clinician, and really have to think, right? Like you have to learn something totally different, something totally new, and figure out how can I apply mental skills to these athletes? How can I help these athletes? If they are down in a game and they really, and they need the skills or the coping strategies to help them push through that. So, I would say yes, went in right away, basketball, 100%. And then I started working with baseball players. I worked with a collegiate bowler. I started working with soccer teams and football. Like I just really started to get outside of my comfort zone, and I will never regret that. Like that right there was 100% what I needed to build upon my competency as a mental performance consultant and as a counselor. Like I needed that experience, because I was confident with basketball. I knew when people felt down and in times in the game or when they really needed to use these skills or coping strategies. And then I'm in bowling, I'm talking with this athlete about, okay, what's a pre-game strategy or pre-bowl strategy that we can have for you, and I'm learning about the game while I'm learning about the athlete, and I'm having to do research. Like, what do I need to do to help this athlete become a better performer? And so, yeah, that's definitely a big tidbit: is get outside of your comfort zone, work with other teams, other athletes, from the sport that you previously played or have experience in, because you'll see how much growth within that short time span. It's amazing.
What's really cool too is that I'm sure like once you understand sort of the sports psychology principles, whether it's visualization or breathing techniques, like a lot of that also overlaps with other sports. And so once you understand the basic
Hmm.
foundations, principles, you can start to apply them in different ways. And just like you said, I'm sure it makes you that much more competent because you're not only are you going to able to get a job in one area, but you'll be able to get multiple jobs. So I guess it probably even showcases your vast array of skill sets that
Yeah,
you've worked with different teams, worked with different sports, and it probably makes you that much more competitive in terms of getting a job or a career.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh man, that's so cool. Coming to kind of a little bit of a close, but I'd love to know. I mean, kind of talking about this area of self care and decreasing the stigma around mental health. For you, what does it look like to take care of your health, whether it's your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health? How do you take care of yourself as a clinician?
Yeah, many different ways. Many different ways. I would say the first way for me, just a big stress reliever or just like a self-care piece is just being a father, right? I'm 100% big on just being able to spend time with my family, with my kids. Playing after a long, stressful day. Like there's nothing better than that, right? But outside of that, I'm big into fitness and working out. And I'm actually training for a marathon right now, my first marathon. I was talked into it. So I got about 50 days of training until I run this marathon. But I'm excited for it. I was never a big runner. Never. I was always a person who's like, man, I hate running. Like we had to do the mile test preseason for basketball, and I would just dread it. Of course, I would get a good time, but it was. I just didn't like it. And now I'm just casually going for these 13-mile runs, 10-mile runs, and I'm like, okay, like this doesn't feel bad. I actually enjoy this. It's a big stress relief. So doing that, and then the big time reader. I love to read, and actually was strictly like a sports psych type of guy who was just reading on like the brain and athletes, but you find a lot of value reading within other disciplines and just hearing about how other people think about the brain and how we as people think. It's huge, and so yeah, a big time reader outside of like just research papers and doing things like that. And so I would just say those are my top three things, key things for self care. Um, Father first, husband first, and then go into the exercise. I play basketball still a lot. I'm a big basketball guy, playing mini leagues, open runs, do that thing. And then reading is become a big passion of mine.
Any particular books? Any favorite? Could be sports psychology related. Could just be for fun. But any books in the that you would recommend?
Um, I would say that I know that people were big on this one, and I kind of had pushed to a side because I feel like it was a fad at the time. But Atomic Habits, I feel like it's a great
Oh,
book.
it's a
I don't
great
know if
book.
many people. I think I could read that at the beginning of every year, just to
Yeah,
reset myself and get myself in the right place.
yeah.
Because I always go in with these goals and what I want to do. But I feel like that kind of keeps me on the straight and narrow. And so if anybody hasn't read that book, 100% give that one a try. And if you need a book list, I'd be more than willing to give you my book list. I don't have it around me right now, but I can send you
No
all the books
worries.
that I read so far this year, and they've been great. Like there's not one that I have
Oh,
been
that's
like, oh, that
awesome.
book was okay. So yeah, I can definitely do that if anybody wants me to send you that book list. I'm willing to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for this interview. Definitely want to make sure that we leave down some links that people can check out. You have an Instagram page that's really cool. You talk about sports psychology there, so people can probably reach out to you there. Is there
Yeah.
any other links, or I guess areas that people can reach out to you?
I also have a Twitter. We'll provide a Twitter in there
Okay, for
as
sure.
well, where I talk about some sports like stuff. That one is not sometimes sports like really just 100% all my thoughts sometimes, especially since the NBA playoffs are going on right now.
Yep.
I'm talking about that. But also I will be dropping my own. Like I said, I'm working on my practice right now. So if you do end up following me on Instagram, you'll see my practice and being able to follow that. And yeah, man, if you have any questions, please reach out. I know Phil and I connected via Instagram, and he reached out to me, which I'm very grateful for because I'm very appreciative to him to have me share this space today. But yeah, don't be like I said, don't be afraid to reach out. That it goes a long ways. Like I said, everything eventually comes back full circle, and you'll probably meet that person or be able to connect with that person at a job or be a reference or something like that. So yeah, I'm always willing to answer questions and help somebody out who's interested in this field.
This was awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. It was great
Of
talking
course,
with you,
Phil.
and
Thank
definitely hope
you.
to have you back in the future. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.